it's time to reject the...
Can we have Sandra White, to be followed by Liam Kerr?
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. How sad to hear of the contribution from Mr Kelly. I really would have thought better of him, and very sad to hear that. Presiding Officer, I attended a joint meeting in Westminster just last week, and my thoughts go to everyone who suffered there. We passed along that bridge also, and I'm sure I echo everyone in this chamber when I say our thoughts go with them. After that meeting, I was speaking to various people in Westminster, not just from my own party, but from others also. And the subject went on to Brexit. And I was very fortunate to be giving the paper from the House of Commons Library, which is called Legislating for Brexit, the Great Repeal Act. And it makes really interesting and good reading also. Now, I've heard numbers, and Mr Kelly mentioned it earlier on, that this is not important. But, you know, if you hear what's actually in this Great Repeal Act, I think this debate is very important, not just for Scotland, but for the rest of the UK also. And I'd just like to mention the fact that in this paper, it mentions such issues as the Henry VIII powers. Now, I know that the UK Labour Party and the UK Liberals have raised this issue as well with great concerns about the Henry VIII powers. And page 6 of the publication is headed Devolution. And I quote, legislating for Brexit will have significant implications for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. If the Great Repeal Bill transposes all directly applicable EU law, it could effectively implement a range of provisions that are within the devolved competence, for example, agriculture, etc. This would require consent from the devolved legislators, so long as the Sewell Convention is respected. Now, it goes on, and this is where it becomes very interesting, page 48 of the Great Repeal Bill. The Sewell Convention, even its statutory form, includes a rider that the government will not normally legislate with regard to devolved matters without consent. However, it is not clear, and I quote from page 48 of this bill, however, it is not clear if the withdrawal from the EU would be considered, inverted commas, normal. Thus, it will be a political matter where the Sewell Convention is indeed in play. In legal terms, the power of the UK Parliament to legislate on devolved matters without consent is stated in the devolution statutes. If consent is sought, it might be withheld, or the process of securing consent might introduce a delay. Equally, not using the Sewell Convention would bring its own political issues and would raise objections, quite rightly, as I said, not quoted, in the devolved institutions. Now, let's look at the devolved issues. Agriculture, fishing, the environment. In fact, Professor Douglas Scott drew attention to this in a paper in the Scottish Parliament's European and External Relations Committee. And I quote on page 49 of this report, the aim of the Great Repeal Bill is to convert EU law into national law. However, a good part of EU law relates to competencies that have been devolved. For example, fishing, etc., public procurement, environmental law, as well as many others. If the Great Repeal Bill translates EU law on matters that have been devolved into UK law, this could amount to legislation on devolved areas. Now, last week, Kezia Dugdale and John Lamont mentioned the fact, and Kezia Dugdale mentioned the fact that taking back powers from Brussels to Scotland, and John Lamont said Scotland may gain powers. Now, you read this Great Repeal Act, it acts in the opposite way. That's why it's so important that we have a vote on this particular issue. And in my mind, and many others, the debate today and the vote tonight is not... Excuse me a minute, please. The debate tonight, it's not only about Scotland and the people of Scotland having a choice. It's about protecting the very sovereignty of this Parliament. That's what it's about. And I think people should realise that. It's a very, very important issue. Now, the Unionist parties can argue and pontificate all they want. The fact of the matter is Brexit has changed everything. The manifesto we were elected on clearly states the Scottish Parliament shall have the right to hold another referendum if there is a material change in the circumstances that prevailed in 2014, such as Scotland being taken out of the EU. We were not where we were in 2014, and there is a substantial material change That is why the circumstances have changed. It is only right that people of Scotland are given the opportunity to choose their future. That's why it's an important debate. If I can touch on, Presiding Officer, the talk from the opposition parties about division, or along with Scotland's too wee and too poor. Basically, that's all they've talked about. And I must say, if you'd be quiet, please, just a second. You've had your say. I must say, that's all they've talked about. But the language that's been used by the unionist and opposition parties, to me, is unbecoming to this Parliament. And what a terrible, terrible example they have set to our young people, to the Scottish people and to the international world. It is disgusting. Presiding Officer, I come from a family of Irish, English and a Scottish background. There was never any division. In fact, all of my family before 2014 were Labour Party, not just members, but voters also. We never had division in our house. We had plenty of debate, and that is healthy. Debate is healthy. We now, as a family, get together. We still have Labour. We have SNP, one Labour, by the way, SNP and Greens. Thankfully, we have no Tories. Support this motion tonight.
I have